Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Firefighters tried to gain the upper hand as more than 100 wildfires continue to rage in both central and northern Alberta. The Trudeau government announced close to $400 million in funding to help tackle gang and gun violence in Canada. And music fans of Gordon Lightfoot came out to pay their respects to the legendary Canadian folk singer.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith met with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to discuss potential federal help for crews battling more than 100 wildfires in the province. Trudeau says Ottawa will support Alberta as wildfires overwhelm a number of communities. That includes potential military help. Close to 30,000 people have been ordered to leave their homes. Fortunately, an evacuation order was lifted late Sunday for the 8,400 who live in Edson. Premier Smith declared a provincial state of emergency on Saturday. So far, fires have scorched around 380,000 hectares across the province. Emergency management officials say it's been very difficult gathering information on how much damage has been sustained so far, since the wildfire situation is ever evolving.
I want to stress that many of you want to know the extent of damage. At this time, reports are still coming in. In some cases, ongoing smoke and fire conditions prevent us from fully assessing property loss, and until we can do that, we are limited in the details we can provide. We know structures have been lost, but our first priority is protecting lives and dealing with the emergency response, first and foremost. Our number one priority is the safety of human lives, and we will provide more details on the extent of damage in the days ahead as we confirm with affected municipalities.
At least 31 of the 108 wildfires burning are out of control. Now, fortunately, some areas in the central part of the province have been receiving some much-needed rain, which has been helping firefighters, but areas further north have not been as fortunate. The evacuations continue.
It happened late night, around like 11 o'clock. So I closed my restaurant and came home, and all of a sudden my phone rang like you have to evacuate. So it was kind of a mess. It was pretty close. We thought it's gonna be okay. It was across the river, and like in no time it just jumped over the river. So that's when the exact panic happened. So we see everybody was like panicking and driving away, so it was like a big traffic. And then we grab our things from both house and the restaurant and my friends here. So my family is luckily back home, but like our friends pretty close ones. So we gathered together and then make some plan. We drove together out of the Drayton, and then there was like a heck of a traffic. So luckily we made it to Edmonton in like 4 hours. And with the kids, this was like a difficult things, but we have friends here who opened the door for us, so it makes the thing a little easier for us, but at the end of the day, it's like leaving home is not easy.
Federal Indigenous Services Minister Patty Hajdu says a big concern for many are the 15 First Nations communities here in Alberta, which have been impacted by the devastating wildfires.
Indigenous Services Canada has been working nonstop with the leadership, including partners at the Government of Canada, to coordinate and ensure evacuees and community efforts are well supported. I spoke this week with Chief Conray Sewepagam of Little Red River Cree Nation, some of the biggest fires impacting his communities. It's been a very difficult time, as you can well imagine, for everyone. Infrastructure is being lost. There are active efforts underway to try to protect what infrastructure is remaining, but it's very, very difficult, and I would say quite a treacherous situation. Indigenous Services Canada will continue to be there to support the 15 First Nations, and we're ensuring supports through the Emergency Management Assistance Program, which has actually just been reformed, thankfully, so that communities have the flexibility to acquire the equipment they need or the people that they need, and in a much more flexible way that allows for far faster action.
Much of the emergency response is also coming in the form of humanitarian aid. The Canadian Red Cross is assisting people evacuated from Drayton Valley and its surrounding areas with accommodation support. Red Cross personnel are on site at the Edmonton Expo Centre, and at the request of the Alberta Emergency Management Agency, the Canadian Red Cross has sent supplies including cots, blankets, pillows, and hygiene kits to the areas where they're needed the most. Additionally, the Salvation Army has deployed teams to regions hardest hit by the Alberta wildfires. Major Ben Lippers says he's been chatting with his teams while on his way to the fires.
So we have a team up in High Prairie right now, feeding 500 people. They're feeding them in 4 different locations. So they're transporting the meals to hotels because of mobility issues. So that's a team we have on ground right now. We have a team that's part of the ESS group up in Fort Mac area, and they are on standby with that whole ESS team. They've been on standby for a bit now. And we also have a group ready to launch in High Prairie. But as you can well imagine, the fire has jumped highways, has closed this highways. Best laid plans for tomorrow are changed in the middle of the night. So we're kind of going up and down on that spectrum. And we're in consultation with a group out in the western part of the province for us to go and help out at that a reception center with food. Plus, these people are coming and they have nothing, and some of them have no means to get anything like any extras. They just don't have that capability. So they're talking to us about that, and so we'll probably end up deploying there.
Lethbridge says all of the Salvation Army teams on scene have training specific to emergency disaster management. The team in Lethbridge is currently on standby and did exercises over the weekend with Lethbridge Police Service and Lethbridge and Area Search and Rescue. This week marks Emergency Preparedness Week, which serves as an opportunity to remind Canadians to be prepared for future emergency situations and to make preparedness part of our regular routine. City of Lethbridge Emergency Planning and Risk Manager Luke Palmer says preparedness comes in 3 easy steps.
Number one, we want people to know the risks, and that's specific here to Lethbridge and the region, know exactly what we could encounter here. And obviously, like our counterparts up north, wildfire is one of our number 1 risks here. Number 2 is making a plan. So in terms of if your family and yourself, if you're at work, others are at school, how will you meet? Where will you meet? How will you communicate? And any other things in terms of your plan, in terms of if you're at home, how are you going to evacuate? And finally, the last step that we advocate for everybody is to have an emergency kit, whether that's in your vehicle, at your home or work, or all 3 in tandem.
Palmer also provided an update on how the City of Lethbridge is providing aid to those affected by the wildfires in the central and northern parts of the province, and how they can help provide support to the emergency operation centres. He says close to 50 evacuees have now safely relocated to Lethbridge.
So last Friday, we actually got a number of people, not just in the city, but the entire South region on a standby, and had a pretty good uptake from that. So nothing happened until about yesterday evening when we did receive some evacuees and worked with Alberta Health Services on that, which is exciting that we're getting involved. On top of that, I do know that we'll have about 3 city staff that are actually going to be moving up north to help support actions in their emergency operations centers, and looking forward to that opportunity and helping out our province at the same time.
The village of Sterling in southwestern Alberta has answered the call when it comes to lending a helping hand with the wildfires. Sterling Mayor Trevor Lewington says a small team of firefighters is already helping to battle the out-of-control wildfires, which are continuing to burn in many areas of the province.
We were contacted over the weekend by Alberta Emergency Management. Of course, the province has all kinds of interagency agreements and mutual aid agreements. So we were able to provide them with some information about the training and equipment that we have available. So Sterling is contributing our wildland unit, which is very much like a heavy-duty pickup with pumps and other equipment. So it's a little bit lighter than a traditional fire truck that your viewers will be familiar with. It allows them to get in between homes out in green spaces. So our crew has training both for structural fires, but they're really going to be focused on their other training, which is wildland. So they're going to be focused on the interface between sort of forest and grassland and urban areas, and trying to work on preventing the fire from moving and entering an urban area. But all of our folks have that dual training. So if they're required to be engaged in other services or support fire suppression for structures, then they can be retasked for that effect. So we're contributing our truck. 3 of our firefighters are going on this initial deployment. They're probably going to be out there for 10 days to 2 weeks. And then we've got another crew of 3 that will relieve them, because of course this is very demanding work and there's some not so very pleasant circumstances. And so we want to make sure that they're fresh and they're taken care of. And we've got 2 crews ready to deploy. One's already gone. And like I said, they'll rotate out as needed.
Now, Picture Butte Emergency Services is also helping out by donating a fire engine along with a crew of 5 to help battle the out-of-control wildfires. Officials with Lethbridge County say our region remains under a fire restriction due to the elevated risk of fire. Byron Fraser, the manager of fire services, says even though we receive a little bit of moisture, it's not been enough to lift the restriction. Under the fire restriction, all active fire and fireworks permits have been cancelled. No new ones will be issued until further notice. Various fines will apply for burning during a fire restriction. While we saw a few light showers in parts of southwestern Alberta today, moisture that is desperately needed in both the central and northern part of the province as well, with all of the wildfires going on right now. Jeanette Rocher is here now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, it appears as though we may see a little more moisture come our way over the next few days.
Yeah, well, we could also see the possibility of a thunderstorm this evening, Hal, along with that 30% chance of showers. Same thing for Tuesday, a slight chance of showers. We could see that afternoon thunderstorm as well, but a daytime high, which puts us right there in the seasonal range. Now, as we get later on into the week, that's when the conditions should dry up. Most of that moisture in the beginning of the week. I'll be back later in the show, Hal, to give you that full weather forecast.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. The Trudeau government says it is taking more action when it comes to preventing gun and gang violence. Federal Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino says Ottawa will spend $390 million over the next 5 years as part of a renewed program to fight crime. The funds will support policing and prevention programs.
These federal funds will be distributed to the provinces and territories for the purpose of giving law enforcement the additional people, resources, and supports that they need to get the job done and to get the job done safely. On the back end, it's also being used to support the BC Prosecution Service to put criminals behind bars and to help the BC Forensic Firearms Laboratory link illegal guns to crimes. And finally, here in Ontario, the money is being used for both intervention and enforcement, supporting investigations by the Provincial Guns and Gangs Support Unit, as well as the community initiatives like the Indigenous Youth Gang Prevention and Intervention Program, among others.
Ottawa is expelling the Chinese diplomat allegedly involved in a plot to intimidate Conservative MP Michael Chong and his relatives in Hong Kong. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says the Toronto-based diplomat Zhao Wei is now considered persona non grata. She says the decision comes after careful consideration. Joly previously warned that Beijing would retaliate if the Trudeau government chose to expel diplomats. Federal ministers announced on Monday that funding will be made available to help build and operate 178 new shelter spaces and transitional homes for many of our country's most vulnerable, including Indigenous women and girls. Federal Housing Minister Ahmed Hussain says these new shelter spaces will help support the culture of many in our Indigenous communities.
These new Indigenous-led projects will offer survivors of family and gender-based violence access to culturally appropriate services that will aid in their journey of healing. As Wik-Wemikong First Nation eloquently expressed when they opened their own 13-unit shelter in 2018, these new shelter spaces and transitional housing units will provide future residents the opportunity to restore and revitalize Indigenous ways of being.
Lethbridge fire crews responded to a residential fire in the 300 block of 12th Street B North on Sunday. Fire officials say when they arrived around 6 in the morning, they were quickly able to extinguish the basement blaze. One person was taken to hospital with undisclosed injuries. No damage estimate has been made available as of yet, and the cause of the fire is under investigation. The case involving a former gymnastics teacher charged with sexual assault has been held over until June the 12th. The courts heard that Jamie Ellicott needs to find a lawyer. Ellicott faces 5 counts each of sexual interference and sexual assault of a person under the age of 16. He was originally charged in July of last year after police responded to a report that a 7-year-old girl was sexually assaulted between May and June of 2022 while attending the Lethbridge Gymnastics Academy. There's been some pushback in regards to the twinning of Highway 3, which connects Alberta with southeastern BC. Residents in the Crow's Nest Pass are upset that expansion plans include a connector road which would go through the Frank Slide, the devastating slide which occurred 120 years ago, killing around 92 people. Some say it's simply disrespectful since the area is basically a graveyard. The mayor of Crow's Nest Pass agrees. Blair Painter says it's also a concern, but he says it's basically a done deal and says the most he can hope for is some tweaks that will be made to accommodate residents' concerns.
In regards to the Frank Slide, Frank Slide area, there's a proposed new road to be pushed through the slide. which is definitely concerning. The west end of the slide is deemed to be a graveyard, and people definitely have concerns about it. Plus, it's a National Historic Site, and it's our objective to, along with both the federal government and the provincial government, to twin Highway 3 from the Saskatchewan border to the BC border. And this is primarily on two fronts, safety for our residents in the south. We've had a lot of fatalities on Highway 3. And also to support the growing ag industry. So it's crucial that the highway get twinned.
Since the pandemic, affordable housing has been a major problem for many Canadians. Now, there's a city that has a silver lining, however, to the crisis, and that's Lethbridge. BCN's Naveen Day has that story.
3 years ago, families could purchase a brand new home just like this one in Lethbridge for an affordable price compared to larger cities, and they would have manageable payments. That's thanks to home prices in Lethbridge and low interest rates. But those same families are feeling the pinch after numerous increases to interest rates. But according to mortgage broker and new home sales specialist Suketu Shah, mortgage rates are on the decline and eyes are turning to Lethbridge to get more bang for their buck.
Right now, the market is very steady, so the prices are not going higher, not going lower. But compared to like Edmonton, Calgary, Canmore, a lot of places like those, Lethbridge is still very, very affordable, close to the mountains and close to US border as well. So I think Lethbridge right now is a hot market right now for people who are moving from east and from the other side as well, and even for the local people as well.
One example is Matthew Mueller. He recently moved to Lethbridge from Hamilton because the cost of living in Ontario was simply unbearable.
You know, you have semi-detached homes going for like $700,000 to, like $1 million almost. Meanwhile here in Alberta, it's like, 400,000, 500,000, or even less, depending on where you go. Even with two full-time incomes, it was simply like impossible to just afford daily living, with between the rent and the utilities and vet bills and whatever else we had come up, it was just unrealistic.
Despite having moved to Alberta just under a week ago, Mueller says he is already feeling the effects of the Alberta advantage.
The sales tax, being only, is it 5% with the GST, compared to 13% on like literally everything, and some groceries here you don't even pay tax on. So that's already an improvement. Looking at the housing market, it's considerably cheaper here in Alberta, even in Calgary, which is, pretty expensive compared to say like Lethbridge or, Medicine Hat or Red Deer or whatever. It's still more affordable than where I lived before.
And according to Shaw, Lethbridge is attractive to potential home buyers because they can get more house for less money.
Some people do cash deals, some people do the rates at 4.5, and a lot of people just try to move here. And Lethbridge is being one of the very popular in the whole country right now.
For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
As the weather warms up, we're seeing more and more outdoor activities these days, including baseball. The Ball Diamonds have been filling up nicely, and on Sunday, the Prairie Baseball Academy held tryouts for the upcoming season. Dozens of ball players between the ages of 15 to 19 had the chance to batter up at Nolan Field in Lethbridge, vying for a spot on the AA Elks, Single A Miners, and the B Club Lakers teams. And for the first time in 3 years, the PBA will host its rivaling American teams right here in our city. Officials say during the pandemic, the U.S. teams were unable to cross the border without isolating for 2 weeks.
Yeah, it is kind of nice to be able to host some clubs up here. The past few years, we haven't been able to have the American Legion teams come up here, so we've had to either travel down there or just run more so locally. So it is nice to get back to an original schedule. That's behind us. We're back to normal. We're playing our full schedule this year.
Good to see baseball once again. PBA's home opener is coming up Sunday, June 11th at Spitz Stadium. Dozens of people gathered around a memorial in Edmonton and laid flowers and stuffed animals in honor of a mother and her child. Family members identified the victims of a stabbing outside of an elementary school as 35-year-old Carol Ann Robillard and her child. Police say the two were stabbed May 5th outside of Crawford Plains School in southeast Edmonton. They say officers responded and shot a man matching the description following an altercation.
It's very hard because other people I know that lost their kids or their daughter, now I know the pain they're going through. Yeah. Carol Ann, my daughter, she was a beautiful girl. She was a model. She was happy. She had dimples. And she loved her brothers and sisters, her nieces, her nephews, cousins, everyone. She's very full of love, just like me. My other granddaughter is going to have a hard time. She needs a lot of counseling and all that because she's seen it all. And she made it through. And she's only 8 years old.
More than 1,000 fans of iconic folk singer Gordon Lightfoot gathered on the weekend at his hometown in central Ontario to say goodbye to a man whose music brought joy and comfort to so many people.
He's been a great inspiration to all of us and all of Canada, and to personally my own family and myself. And my own music, my honor was to play at Mariposa the same year he opened it up in 2000. So there's been a lot of ties to Mr. Lightfoot and his music, and he's just an icon.
Fortunately, his music will live on forever. While we saw a little moisture here in parts of southwestern Alberta, there's a chance of more shower activity over the next few days. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. You know, many people have been hoping and praying for lots of rain in the central and northern parts of the province, with over 100 wildfires still burning. Wow. Jeanette Roche is now with a complete look at the forecast. Now, Jeanette, for our region here in southwestern Alberta, it appears as though we may see some light showers.
Yes, that's right. Right through midweek, actually, is when we should be seeing that moisture. And it is just a slight chance. We are looking at the 30% chance of showers for this evening into Tuesday night, and into Wednesday. Also mixed with that thunderstorm risk that would be happening this evening and overnight Tuesday, as well as possibly Tuesday afternoon as well. But we are getting into those seasonable temperatures. The high of 15 for both Tuesday and Wednesday, up to 19 on Thursday. Mainly cloudy skies also on Thursday. And then as we get into the latter part of the week and into the weekend, that's when the sun will shine again. High of 23 on Friday, up to 26 on Saturday, and 27 for a high on a Sunday. Not a bad weekend at all. 17 is the average high for this time of year. 3 is the average low. 30 was our high temperature on this day. That happened back in 1987. And in 1943, we had the chilliest, which was -4. The sun rose this morning at 5:57. Sunset this evening just before 9 p.m. We're looking at 8:59. So just over 15 hours now of daylight. Okay, so on the west coast tomorrow, going to be a sunny one in Victoria. Light winds, but more like 30k winds by the Juan de Fuca Strait there. 17 for a high in Vancouver. Also a mix of sun and clouds. 60% chance of showers in both Edmonton and Calgary tomorrow, with that risk of a thunderstorm. High of 16 for both of those cities. As we look at the rest of the prairies, high of 22 in Saskatoon, 21 in Regina. Also looking at 30% chance of showers in both of those cities, with the risk of a thunderstorm. Same thing for Winnipeg, actually. 30% chance of showers. Possibility of a thunderstorm, high of 20 degrees there. Not so much the case in the central part of the country, though. Looking at lots of sunshine, dry conditions, 19 for a high in Toronto and 17 for both Ottawa and Montreal, with clear skies there. As we get into the Maritimes, Fredericton's high tomorrow, 14, beautiful sunny skies, high of 11 degrees in Halifax. Now, Charlottetown could see a possibility of some showers mixed with some flurries there, high of 8 degrees and a high of only 7 in St. John's, looking at a 60% chance of showers. Also expecting 60k winds there as well. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
The wildfires here in Alberta has hurt production at Vermilion Energy. The energy company says it temporarily shut down 30,000 barrels of oil equivalent per day of production as it assesses operation risks due to the blazes. This comes a day after Paramount Resources said it temporarily curtailed around 50,000 barrels per day due to the wildfires. Close to 30,000 people have been forced from their homes as around 108 wildfires continue to burn across Alberta. A new report says employee turnover causes a ripple effect that leads to more departures. The study, involving researchers from the University of British Columbia, found that employee exits change the operational and social fabric of workplaces. Researchers found that layoff notices had a strong and immediate impact, increasing voluntary turnover among those who stayed at the company. The team analyzed information of around 1 million employees and more than 1,600 stores of retail chains over a 22-month period. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 43 points on the day to finish at 20,585. The Dow was down 55 points to 33,618. The S&P 500 was up just under 2 points today to 4138, and the Nasdaq was up 21 points to 12,256. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.82 to 73.16 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was up 10 cents to $2.24 U.S. Gold was up 2 cents to $2,021.19 U.S. an ounce, and silver was up a cent to $25.56 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.10 per bushel, barley's at $8.93, canola's at $16.60, and corn is at $10.14 per bushel. Live cattle June contract was up 50 cents to $162.43. Feeder cattle were up 90 cents to $203.43, and lean hogs were up a dime to $75.63. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to $74.80 U.S. Recapping one of our top stories, Alberta Premier Daniel Smith met with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to discuss potential federal help for crews battling the 108 wildfires in the province. Trudeau says Ottawa can help with military assistance as needed. Close to 30,000 people have been ordered to leave their homes. Premier Smith declared a provincial state of emergency on Saturday. So far, fires have scorched around 380,000 hectares across the province. A U.S. national security advisor says Washington is allowing Israel to take whatever action is necessary to protect itself from the Iran nuclear threat. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will have details for us shortly. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you. As Iran's nuclear threat continues to grow, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says Washington is allowing Israel to take whatever action is necessary against that threat. Now, to chat about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert and host of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari, joins us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, what kind of action could Israel possibly take against Iran's nuclear threat?
Look, this statement from Sullivan, I mean, it's interesting because obviously Israel has been keeping an eye on Iran, the threat, obviously how far they've gone in their weapons program. They can't afford not to. And that's really what's really interesting about this. Like Jake Sullivan saying the sky is blue. Obviously, Iran's neighbors, they obviously know about the regime for 44 years. They know what they're capable of, and they're listening to their threats. So if there is an existential threat, which there is on the table, Israel spends 24/7 worrying about these threats, whether it's Iran supporting Hamas, whether it's Iran's regime supporting Palestinian Islamic Jihad, whether it's Iran's regime supporting Hezbollah. So they live with this threat of war every single day, which is supported by Iran's regime. And now, with Jake Sullivan saying they would have to go at it themselves and they would have permission, quote unquote, to do so. Basically, it's Washington coming out in front and saying, we're aware of, Israel kind of keeping an eye on Iran's regime and this threat. This is particularly important because Washington has come almost from behind in a lot of these different foreign policy surprises that we've had in the last 2 years, the last of which being Iran's regime getting back together with Saudi Arabia and China brokering that deal. They caught them by surprise, right, of course. And we have, a lot of different stains, so to speak, on their foreign policy record. So at this point, it's Washington coming out in front and saying, if Israel should have to go at it alone, if they should have to defend themselves, which, by the way, they have been doing because we have had very targeted attacks on weapons depots in Syria and in, again, very targeted places within their weapons program. They've been doing it already. So this is basically Washington coming out in front and saying, if Israel has to do something, we understand that they have to do something.
Lisa, anti-Semitism appears to be on the rise yet again, but this time at a Dutch soccer game. Police arrested 154 fans attending a match for chanting anti-Semitic chants.
Yeah, this is just a global obsession at this point, and really we wonder where it's coming from. It's being, perpetrated by the media, by Hollywood, of course, social media, where these groups are able to mobilize. I mean, when they get people together, like in a soccer game, in a country where soccer is a very important sport, part of the culture, right? Why are people obsessed about Israel or Jews or anything like that? I mean, are they worried about any other culture or race or religion? It really begs the question as to why Jew hatred has become such a global trend, how to stop it. I mean, there's so many movements out there trying to raise awareness about this, but I'll bring your attention to some main core parts of society that are spreading this more and really fanning the flames. And that's the university system, pop culture, social media, the government. We have elected officials here in the United States, for example. I know you have them in Canada. I know they exist in the UK. We've reported about those at the Foreign Desk, whose main interest is bashing Israel, and really, for some reason, it's an obsession. And here you have it, 150 soccer fans, not worried about soccer, but for some reason, obsessed about a religion.
Yeah, the fans supporting AZ Alkmaar were on their way to watch their team take on the Jewish Associated Club Ajax in Amsterdam when a lot of the chants broke out. Lisa, it appears as though Taiwan may be even more vulnerable to a Chinese invasion as word comes that the United States is not giving vital weapons to help support Taiwan's national defense. Weapons that may have gone, to support the war in Ukraine?
Right. And that's exactly the fear. A lot of reports are coming out saying that the United States overexerted themselves in helping Ukraine, and they continue to do so, right? Anything that we can do to help Ukraine, we continue to do so. Zelensky asking for more and more, and the United States definitely obliging, and not only obliging, pressuring our allies like South Korea and Israel to give more as well. Wanting to put as much as we can into this war in Ukraine, but the question becomes, if we do get overly involved in Ukraine as we have, will we have the resources to give the military equipment to Taiwan to defend itself against China? And that's really on the table. And again, if you were China, if you would want to invade Taiwan, this would be the time to do so, because you see the vulnerability and you see the inability of the West, especially the United States, to help out and provide military supply.
Are we seeing a lot of signs right now that there could be a potential invasion just around the corner?
Perhaps. Look, because of the timing of all of this, because of the provocations, we're seeing provocations from China on a daily basis. And it's been a while where we're seeing their activities in the seas. We're seeing them kind of take action against the United States, for example, for meeting with Taiwan. We're seeing a lot of escalation. Now, will that lead to an invasion? Perhaps they would time it before the end of the Biden administration, and we'd understand why that would be the case.
There are some reports that there may be some internal problems within the U.S. Armed Forces. Lisa, apparently there are issues arising in the U.S. Navy with ships facing some poor maintenance and bad timing with the U.S.'s presence on the high seas needed right now, being challenged by the likes of China, Russia, and Iran.
Exactly. I mean, these are the kinds of reports that you wonder, when they come out, should they actually be public? And it's because it's actually exposing the vulnerability of the U.S. Marines. In this case, the ships not being either properly maintained, not being able to run, and therefore not being dispatched out to various situations and scenarios. So there are examples in the last year or two where ships were not ready to go out and therefore they didn't. So imagine that U.S. presence would be absent from an equation that would need our attention. And again, it's very worrisome. And the U.S. Marines are speaking out, the Navy is speaking out and saying, look, you got to help us help you. And this is not the case right now. We have it's a blind spot. It's a vulnerability. And maybe these reports would help them really pick up the pace and keep these ships in tip-top shape, that they could be dispatched out to areas that need our help and attention.
Lisa, a report out of Washington says the Biden administration's bungling of the withdrawal from Afghanistan decimated the U.S. military's capability to really gather key intelligence and information on terrorist activities. A U.S. intelligence official confirmed the details to Congress last week.
It's an interesting and, again, very obvious observation to say when we don't have a presence somewhere, we don't have eyes and ears on the ground, we're not able to gather intel. Now, that's the case that many people make to say that we need to have some sort of foothold, some sort of presence in the Middle East. Now, Are we going to have forever wars? That's the other side of the argument, right? So now, we talk about Afghanistan. Obviously, the withdrawal there left them vulnerable and our assets as well vulnerable, and the withdrawal was horrific. But both sides of the political aisle agreed that we would want to withdraw from Afghanistan. Now, had we done so in a more organized fashion, we would still have certain assets, whether they become intelligence keepers or, people who stay on the ground and help them nation build. For that reason, that's a strong argument to say we could help them and they can help us. Having allies on the ground, for example, in places like Syria, Iraq, we have the Kurdish community. They've always been our eyes and ears on the ground as well. We have assets there as well. And now to withdraw from Iraq, for example, would also be detrimental to our intelligence gathering and would also increase the chance of more insurgencies and more political vacuums and vulnerabilities growing on the ground there. So those are two sides of the argument. And of course, we don't want forever wars. We don't want our sons and daughters out there forever in harm's way, but we do want to establish some sort of stability if we do send our troops there to actually have some sort of long-term benefit for the United States in terms of stability, security of the region, and of course, intelligence here at home.
The Texas Army and Air National Guard Operation Lone Star troops are preparing and making preparations to prevent the entry of illegal foreign nationals between ports of entry along the Texas-Mexico border. Are you anticipating a huge influx fairly soon?
Huge. This is because of the sunsetting of the Title 42, which was legislation passed under the Trump era that would be able to send migrants back home because of COVID. And then the Biden administration wanted to overturn that, but then happened to extend it because of the emergency at the border, realizing that we cannot absorb these numbers. Now, as a matter of fact, you have a lot of blue cities like New York City, the mayor there, Eric Adams, speaking out and saying we cannot absorb the sheer number of people being bused to our city. They're putting them up in hotels and the resources are just not enough. And now because of the sunsetting of this legislation, we have, I think the reports are now over 100,000 at the border trying to get in, knowing, and of course the coyotes helping them get in and taking advantage of the fact that this legislation is going to expire. Now, Border Patrol tells us that they cannot control the number of people coming in. And of course, Hal, look, there are many well-intentioned people coming in for a better life, for work, for many, many different good reasons. And there are also bad actors that are shuffled in there as well because they're taking advantage of the situation. And that's how it goes. We cannot vet the number of people coming in. We cannot absorb the number of people coming in. And of course, the expiring of this legislation is only going to exacerbate that situation to exponential limits. So let's see what happens in the next week or two.
Meanwhile, the American government is directing U.S. Border Patrol agents to release foreign nationals, including a number of Hondurans, into the United States with notice to appear in court in 2026. Come on, Lisa, will they?
Yeah, that's really it's funny, right? I mean, if it weren't sad, I should say it's funny because the system cannot handle or accommodate the numbers. So their court dates are set for 2, 3, 4 years from now, and of course, those individuals, again, many of them wonderful, hardworking, coming into the country for good reason. Many of them not. In the past week or two, we had a handful of crimes that were perpetrated by illegal migrants coming into the country. And again, you just cannot vet, you cannot control. A handful of them being on the FBI's most wanted list. Now imagine those who are not on the most wanted list and again, can't be vetted. So yes, the good guys are coming in, but the bad guys are also taking advantage of the situation. And again, the system just is going to collapse. It will not be able to handle, it won't be able to give them court dates or be able to give them the resources that America once was able to promise migrants coming into the country. So these are, again, the very, very serious issues that we're dealing with in terms of migration.
Another serious issue are the tent encampments. We've seen so many set up across North America, including in our cities here in southern Alberta, and a number up and down the west coast as well. Lisa, we've seen the videos, the images, the pictures. Do government officials and agencies have a plan at tackling the homeless issues in your country?
I'm in Los Angeles, where it's probably the one of the most visual cities in terms of these encampments and the tents. They clean them up here in Los Angeles, in the most beautiful parts of the city. They'll set up the encampments, they'll take them down, they'll set them back up the next day. And there are various social media accounts that follow this to just document how crazy this is. Now, our new mayor, Karen Bass, has come up with ideas to put them in new hotels, also new construction. There are these beautiful new modern buildings that are going up. They want to use them for homeless housing. The issue then becomes, the mental illness. Will they want to be in these homes? How to truly get to the root of the problem? And throwing money at it is one option, but really, I don't think that that's going to really help get to the root of the problem and get these individuals off the streets. So I'm not saying I do have the solution, but I think it's much more complex than these cities know how to deal with, or else I think we would have seen some sort of improvement in the last 2 or 3 years. We've only seen really an exacerbation of it, and it's very unfortunate. It's quite sad, and it's sad for everyone. You have these encampments near schools. You have needles on the ground near parks and schools. These are beautiful suburbs where children just want to have an innocent childhood and play, but they're exposed to a lot more than they'd want to be.
Political reporter and foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.
Alberta's provincial election will take place on May 29th, and today we have the privilege of speaking with Gwendolyn Dirk, the NDP candidate for Brooks Medicine Hat. Gwendolyn, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you.
So we were talking a little bit before we got started here about your career as an educator. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to jump into this provincial political game, or maybe nightmare for some people, depending on who you talk to?
Absolutely. We were chatting before. I grew up on a farm in Saskatchewan, and there were very few options for women growing up in farming families to break away. And so I chose education. And so I taught for 33 years. Most of my career was in teaching in high schools, English. But the last 13 years of my career, I moved to the Medicine Hat College, where I taught in adult development. I taught English to adults coming back. And it was such a rewarding experience teaching there, because people who wanted a second chance, maybe, and to build a life for themselves. I had the privilege of teaching them and watching them graduate from their programs and become social workers or nurses or teachers or whatever. I ended up in this particular role because in 2020, because the UCP cut $700 million to post-secondary education, our college suffered drastically. We lost about $3 million of that, and my division was cut and closed down. At that point, I had a choice. I could go back to the public system, or I could retire. And I decided to leave the jobs for the younger generation. I had done my time. And I became very involved in the community as a volunteer and an advocate. I joined just about every club I could find. And I became a member of the Medicine Hat Police Commission, the Palliser Triangle Health Advisory Council, Kiwanis, Rotary, Samus Immigration, etc. And when you do this kind of work, eventually you get called to try to build a better world. And I was called to run for the Alberta NDP because I feel like it most closely reflects the values that I was raised with, to give people opportunities to build the middle class, and I feel that's being lost under this particular government.
So thinking back to your time as being an educator at the college and having these adults come to learn more skills so they can get better jobs, and then kind of pairing that with the community helps that are there, like you were talking about the groups that you were part of. Maybe talk a little bit about how important those community supports are to the community of Medicine Hat and Brooks.
The community supports are very important. However, I just feel like in the last little while, more and more people are having to access the community supports because of this affordability crisis. And I feel like in Alberta, with a province that we're just rolling in oil revenues, people right now are struggling more than they ever have struggled. It doesn't seem to add up. We are a very rich province, and so more should be done for people so they don't have to access supports. It's all that I feel. More opportunities should be given to people so they can have a good paying job, so they can make ends meet at the end of the month, so that they can afford to pay their bills. And I don't like that. I feel like the present government has made it more difficult by taking caps off of certain things like tuition. Students are struggling. Student loan rates have gone up. I heard something like 7 or 8% is what they're paying now, where it used to be very minuscule. Things like utilities and car insurance and rent, people are struggling. And so it doesn't seem to add up. And I just feel like fighting with Ottawa and blaming Ottawa isn't the answer. I think we have an Alberta-based solution right here. We can do better in this province.
Right. And certainly a rising tide, as they say, raises all boats. Now, thinking of this election, you're running against the former mayor of Brooks, as well as the premier of Alberta. So what do you see as a path forward to win a seat for the NDP in Brooks Medicine Hat?
Well, the path forward is to just be out there and talk with the different communities, the different groups of people, and listen. Really listen to what their needs are. So I spend a lot of time both in Medicine Hat and Brooks. Spend some time in the rural reaches of the riding, but this is a huge riding, so I can't get everywhere all the time. But I'm listening very intently to what the concerns are, and I'm hearing in Medicine Hat and Brooks this not being able to find and access primary health care. Emergency room waits, people having to wait days to get a blood, or sometimes a month to get a simple blood test. ERs overloaded. It's becoming a huge problem. I think we can do better. Our party has a wonderful plan for healthcare. I think you know about it, family health teams. It's a wave of the future. And we also have a very respectful relationship with healthcare providers, and so they will come back to the province. Right now, we have struggles with vacancies in our residencies. There's 20 still unfilled after the second round of CARMs. So it's scary. The other major issue that I'm really hearing, especially in Brooks, but Medicine Hat as well, is housing. There is such a lack of affordable housing in Brooks that I have gone through apartments that make me want to cry. There are families of 5, 6, 7 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment, paying horrendous amounts of rent. At the end of the month, there's nothing left for them if they can even make ends meet. This is a rich province. We can do so much better.
Yeah, that inflation just seems to impact every area of life. And with the, let's say, the demographics even of Brooks, there are so many people living in apartments and even families, like you say, coming together to share that space. And that is definitely not ideal, not what families are looking for. What are your thoughts maybe on how to deal with inflation as it's affecting food and utilities and housing?
Well, first of all, I know that our party wants to restore the caps that the UCP removed from tuition, from utilities. Utilities have gone through the roof in some areas where people are struggling. We also want to house 40,000 more Albertans. And we want to put them into affordable housing because everyone deserves a safe place to live. And so if I become the MLA for Brooks Medicine Hat, I plan to advocate so hard for both Brooks and Medicine Hat to get a piece of that pie because we really need it here. And again, especially I've seen it in Brooks where it's just sad what is happening. They simply don't have enough houses to house all the people there.
Right. And now home ownership, of course, would be phenomenal for these families. But as you were saying, that there's just too much month left at the end of the money and people need to put their money together even for a down payment. Do you think that there's, in that affordable housing plan, there is something to enable even, well, whether they're newcomers or just young families who've grown up here in the province, do you think there's an opportunity for them through affordable housing to even own their own home?
I don't know if the affordable housing plan of the 40,000 people covers that particular part of it, but I do know that with better paying jobs all around, with more opportunities, with bringing inflation down and cost of living down in general, something needs to be done. We do plan to increase rent subsidies. So, and that's one of my primary goals in my time. Even though I grew up in a relatively poor family with 9 siblings, I was able to build a good life for myself. I feel like that is lost. People can barely make ends meet. You know, I started with nothing and now actually am doing very well. And so it's not for myself that I'm fighting so hard. I'm fighting for these struggling people. I want to see the Alberta that I came to know and love. And I feel like that's being lost. We need to rebuild the middle class because in the last 4 years, more people than ever have fallen below that, and they no longer pay taxes. And so guess what? Even for the middle class, they need to wake up. If you want your taxes to go down, we need more people in the middle class to share that responsibility. And I don't feel this government is doing that. I feel like the NDP is the answer to build a resilient economy, to build more people, put more people in the middle class.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about the brighter future idea that the NDP has? I know, like on your Twitter and other candidates' Twitters, you have the hashtag A Better Future. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. When you have jobs, when you attract investment back to Alberta, when you attract healthcare providers back to Alberta, when you build an economy that's stable, that's resilient, that where we can actually help the oil industry as well to get to net carbon without reducing production. We want to get as much of our oil as we can to market. When we get pipelines in, like Rachel Notley managed to get in her last term, instead of fighting with Ottawa, then you build a better future for people when they can afford to pay their bills at the end of the month, afford to buy a house, when they have a good job that they can go to. Not when you spend all of your time simply fighting and making noise and threatening and doing Sovereignty Act and that sort of a thing that's scaring away investment from Alberta. We need to attract investment, not scare it away.
Right. Now, circling back to the healthcare shortage of employees, I know that that's kind of broad across North America. I know that visiting some family, even back, in Michigan, back in 2006, they were, so that was private healthcare, of course, they were already bringing in nurse practitioners as a way to deal with their doctor shortage. Do you see an equitable opportunity for Alberta to recruit out of province health workers?
We not only want to recruit out of province, I absolutely think that we can recruit out of province if we rebuild a respectful relationship with healthcare providers. Right now, Alberta is the last place they want to come, and it will get worse in the future because we do not have primary care residencies filled. And so I say to people, if you think it's bad now, if Daniel Smith and the UCP win this election, it will get much worse. So absolutely, we will recruit people with our plan. We will also, here's the beauty of this that I'll have to tell you, is there is an example of a family health teams clinic in Tabor that has been running successfully for 10 years. In 10 years, they managed to serve 40% more of residents, 40% more, and in 10 years, they saved $62.2 million. So the beauty of this plan is not only will it attract the healthcare providers back to our province where they don't want to be right now and are not coming back if the UCP wins, it will also save money, and it will also serve 1 million more Albertans will have access to primary care in 1 or 2 days where they live. That's our guarantee.
So is this kind of like, my wife and I used to live on the island in British Columbia, and one of the big things there in healthcare was those P3 relationships and ownership models. So is that kind of what these family clinics are?
I can't speak to that because I'm not familiar with the background context.
Oh,
But I
gotcha.
can tell you a little bit what the family clinics will be like. It will cut down on administrative work. It will attract especially young doctors into Alberta, because young doctors, young people in general, the millennials and after, do not have the same philosophy on work-life balance. They're much healthier in their attitude. They don't work themselves to death like our generation did. They want to go home to families. They want to have vacation. They do not want to be businessmen. They do not want to have to be working 24/7. They want to practice medicine. So this will attract them to that. Bringing in other primary healthcare providers in a family team type of situation, it will take the load off of everyone. It's a family that works together with one patient, with a patient. And so if I can't see my doctor today because he's at home with his newborn baby or her newborn baby, then I see someone else on the team. Maybe it's just a prescription I need filled. I can see the nurse practitioner for that.
Right. Well, that sounds very innovative, and definitely we can't keep doing the same things and expecting different results. So thank you very much for being with us today, Gwendolyn.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
It was great to have you on. That was Gwendolyn Dirk. She is the NDP candidate for Brooks Medicine Hat, and she joined us today from her office in Medicine Hat. For all of us here at Bridge City News, thank you for watching. I'm Michael Clausen.